Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Kashif Kamran and I welcome you to the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass session being organized by ACCA Pakistan for September 2019 examinations. Now, just before starting on with the proceedings for the day one of the Practice to Pass session, I would first like to introduce myself and also the layout of this Practice to Pass session over the next 5 days. Now, in terms of my tutor profile, I am Kashif Kamran, a fellow chartered certified accountant. I am associated with teaching the ACCA qualification for over 12 years now. Currently, I am associated with the Tabani School of Accountancy, which is a platinum approved learning provider of ACCA in Karachi, Pakistan. My core areas of teaching consist of the Advanced Audit and Assurance paper and the Strategic Business Leader paper. This is my seventh Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass session, which is organized by ACCA Pakistan. And my students of AAA have attained several place winner positions, not just in Pakistan, but even beyond Pakistan. Now, with that, I shift my focus towards the purpose and objective of this Practice to Pass session, and then spread out the layout of this session over the next 5 days. Now, firstly, in terms of the day-wise agenda, so you can plan yourself effectively from Monday to Friday. On the very first day today, I will be focusing on risk assessment. Then tomorrow on Tuesday, I will be focusing on evidence. Then on the day 3, which is Wednesday, I will be focusing on ethical, professional, and quality control issues. Then on the fourth day, I will be focusing on other assignments, the non-audit services. And on the fifth and the final day, which is Friday, I will be focusing on reporting. So this is the day-wise agenda, which will help you plan your week from Monday to Friday in terms of your preparation for September 2019 examinations. Now moving on, and just to set the purpose of this practice to pass very clear, the objective of this practice to pass session, which is being organized by ACCA Pakistan, is to focus on practice and not just practicing a question. It is more about knowing what to write and how to write, and more importantly, to know the marking schemes. Because when you come to a practice to pass session, you should get an idea about how to write an answer, and when you're writing the answer, what is exactly the marking scheme of the answer. And because if this topic comes to your exam setting, then you have a perfect idea about what to write, how to write, and exactly know how much marks are you gaining from the content you are writing in the exam paper. So a lot of students are unaware of the marking scheme. They have a blur idea about what to write and how to write. So the aim of the practice to pass session is to guide you about the way you should be writing and presenting your answer in each of the core area of the advanced audit and assurance exam. Now with that objective, which is being spread over the next 5 days from Monday to Friday, that brings me to the pass rates of the AAA exams. And I need to spend some time in my very first day today on analyzing these pass rates because they can really give you deep insights about why students fail in the AAA exam. Now, when you look at these pass rates, and particularly you look at the pass rate of the last exam sitting, which was in June, the passing rate was 31%. And if you look at the preceding exam sittings, you will see the pass rates is on that average average area of around 30 to 31%, with the exception of the June 18 exam sitting, where it was marginally higher at 34%. But this is the common ground of the AAA exams, that mostly the passing rate is around 30%. Now imagine you're taking on a paper which is a challenging paper, right? Because a lot of time, when you go through the course of the AAA and when you go through the books of the AAA, you find AAA an easier exam. But the difficult part of the AAA exam is your writing. The difficult part of the AAA exam is how you write. And the most difficult part of the AAA exam is that when we are writing a 100 marks answer, our answer is not up to the mark. And that is the main reason why we fail the AAA exam. If you look at the content of the AAA exam, it is so simple. If you have studied the AA exam, the audit and assurance exam, and you compare the AA exam with the AAA exam, that is so much similar. But the only difficult thing in the AAA exam is how you are writing your answer. And that is the big reason of student failing the AAA exam. And that's where this practice to pass session uh, comes in, to guide you about what and how you should be writing the answers. There are examiner expectations, right? And we fail to achieve those examiner expectations when we are writing in the answer. And if we are not meeting the expectations of the examiner, obviously majority of the student tends to fail in the AAA exam, with a very minor proportion of the students passing the AAA exams. So I will be investigating over the next 5 days the reasons, the specific reasons, topic by topic, why student tends to fail in the AAA exam. Now, moving on with some of the top 10 reasons why students fail in a AAA exam. And I will be making a more comprehensive analysis of these top 10 reasons on my fifth and final day, when you must have realized why students fail in a AAA exam, and you will be in a better position to understand why students fail in a AAA exam. But just to introduce the first day of this practice to pass session, and just to set the objective very clear, I am just going through the list of the top 10 reasons why students fail a AAA exam. And I believe among the many students who are attending this webinar live today, there might be a majority of the students who might have flunked in the AAA exam. So just try to do a self-analysis of yourself, not just today, over the next 5 days, because this self-analysis will really help you understand what exactly were the weaknesses which you did in the last exam sitting, and what exactly were the reason why you flunked the AAA exams. Firstly, one of the reasons why you failed the AAA exam is that you have a weak command on the core syllabus area. You should understand the core syllabus area. There are plenty of examiner articles on the core syllabus area for you to understand the core syllabus. A lot of time students don't spend proper time on reading the articles. Articles is such a good source when it comes to overcoming the weak command. One of the source of overcoming the weak command is the book, but another source of overcoming the weak command is the examiner articles. Try to spend time on examiner articles, maintain a file of examiner articles, download these articles, take out a printout, maintain a file, and go through these articles, underline these articles, annotate these articles. Try to retain the concepts, try to retain the main crux from every examiner article, try to sum up every examiner article in your mindset. Second, not adapting to circumstances given in the case study. This is the biggest failure, this is the biggest reason of failure. Not adapting. I always mention this in my webinars, in my previous webinars even, that students are not adapting to circumstances given in the exam paper. They just take the rote learn knowledge to exam hall, and they present the rote learned knowledge to the examiner. They're not looking at the situation in the case study. They're not looking at what is so important in the case study. They're not even knowing that what should I be doing when there is a circumstance presented in the case study. So adapting is very, very important. You need to learn over the next 5 days how you should be adapting, because adapting is the key to success here. The number three reason, failing to understand the requirement. A lot of time, student just not understand what is the examiner asking. That means you have not practiced plenty of past papers. Because if you have practiced plenty of exam papers, one good thing with the AAA exam is that there is quite a good consistency in the requirements. The the way the examiner puts the requirement remains very consistent. So if you have practiced the last 5 years, last 6 years paper, you should know the requirements. You should know what is the meaning of that requirement, because a lot of time students fail to understand the requirement. They just overlook the requirement, and then they're producing the answer which is not meeting the expectation of the requirement. Then the number fifth reason is fail to bring in the maturity required to being an audit manager. Now that is something again which can come with practice. You need to present a mature answer, because in every case study in the AAA exam, you are mature as a manager. Every case study says you are a manager. So you need to bring that maturity, and that maturity can only come with practice. Uh, Bringing the jargons, bringing the language of the audit. If you're not bringing the language of the audit in your answers, if you're not bringing the jargons of the audit in your answer, then perhaps you're not demonstrating that maturity which is needed being an audit manager in the case study. Then number fifth, lack of reading or no reading of the examiner report. This is such a serious problem. This is such a serious problem that I have seen so many students, even those students who have flunked 4 times, flunked 5 times, they're not reading the examiner report. You cannot do your self-analysis till the time you sit down with the examiner report. Because in the examiner report, there are so many do's and don'ts, but if you fail to underline the do's and the don'ts from the examiner report, you will be doing the same mistake in the next exam sitting. I always tell my students that download and take a printout of the examiner report, sit down with the examiner report, take two color markers like a blue marker and a black marker, and go through the examiner report. Try to underline the students should do this. Try to underline students should not do this. So till the time you don't underline students should do this and students should not do this, you will not understand where are you going wrong in the triple exam. So try to make a habit of reading the examiner reports, at least the last four examiner reports, at least the last four examiner reports. Download them. You still have a month before exams. You can still analyze the examiner reports and can identify where have you been lacking. And I will be making that realization over the next 5 days, right? I will be making that realization over the next 5 days in terms of how important the examiner reports are. The number sixth, no idea or blur idea of the marking scheme. So many students have blur idea of the marking scheme. They have no idea, either I will be getting 1 mark or I will be getting 2 marks. And when you divide the marks with 1 and 2, then only you know how much you need to write. So if you're dividing the marks with a wrong number, either you're writing more or you're writing less. So over the next 5 days, for every core area, you all will be getting a good idea of the marking scheme. So at the end of the 5 days, you should have your proper list of the marking scheme. Try to maintain a list of the marking scheme over the next 5 days. I will be guiding you the marking scheme topic by topic over the next 5 days. try to maintain a perfect list of the marking scheme for the whole session. The number seventh, writing a lot and senseless writing. That is huge. That is a huge problem. Senseless writing. A lot of time you write so hypothetical in exam paper, so speculative in exam paper. You try to write whatever you wish to write, or you try to write the book knowledge, or you try to write whatever is there in the mind. If a question comes on an audit risk, you will start to write any audit risk, whether it is in the case study or it's not in the case study. At times you write so hypothetical in exam paper. At times you write so speculative in the exam paper. Senseless writing. Firstly, you are a manager. You need to understand the maturity. And then you need to understand that what am I writing? What am I writing as being a manager in the exam paper? So again, these are issues, right? Which I will be addressing over the next 5 days. All of these issues, 1 to 10. I will be addressing all these issues over the next 5 days. The number eighth reason, improper time spent on planning the answer. A lot of times students don't spend time on planning the answer. 1/4 of your time should be spent on planning every question. I'm saying every question. In every question, 1/4 of your time should be spent on planning. And I will make you realize that in my session today and over the next 4 days, that how important is 1/4 time. 1/4 time of every question should be spent on planning, because with a good planning, you can produce a good answer. But if you're just starting your answer without planning, your answer quality will be very, very weak. The number ninth reason, giving too much time on one question. This is a big problem, I think, for many students, right? Giving too much time on one question and compromising other. A lot of students, after failing the triple exams, approaches the tutor and tell the tutor that we completed 75% paper, we completed 80% paper, or if my first question was done in the 2 hours time, or my first question was done in in around 1 hour and 45 minutes. What are you doing? If you're spending too much time on one question, remember, every question counts towards success. Every question counts towards your success. You cannot just overspend time on one question. And that is a big problem with students, that they overspend time on one question. Please don't do that. Don't overspend time on one question. Try to allocate time on all the three questions in a very proper manner. Try to complete 100% paper. If not 100%, at least try to complete 90 to 95% paper. But anything less than that, you are creating a risk for yourself. And the last thing, poor presentation and a layout. Illegible handwriting. I will be guiding you over the next 5 days again about the presentation of the answer, about the layout of the answer. I cannot do anything about the illegible handwriting, right? I cannot guide you about how to improve the handwriting, but at least I can guide you about the poor presentation and the layout. So see these reasons, top 10 reasons. If any one of you have flunked the previous exams, do your self analysis around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Try to identify which reason is more important to you, because over the next 5 days I will be going into each of the reasons and connecting them with the core areas. So out of the list of 10, select which are good reasons for you failing in the triple exams, and why have you been failing the triple exams. So moving my focus away from the top 10 reasons, which I will be covering more in detail once I start my sessions on a day-wise basis, and then accumulating them on the fifth and the final day. Okay, the final thing before I start on with the first day of the Practice to Pass session, there might be many students in the webinar today who might be taking the first attempt of the triple exam in September. So for them, they should be knowing the format of the paper. We know the paper format now consists of 3 questions. There is one question in section A, which is worth 50 marks. And then there are two questions in section B, each worth 25 marks. So in total, we have three questions to be attempted and all are compulsory. There is no choice element in the paper. So section A consists of one 50 marks question. Section B consists of two 25 marks question, and they're all compulsory questions which must be attempted. Now, I have done the analysis in terms of what comes in question one, what comes in question two, and what comes in question three. You need to understand uh, the psyche of the examiner since the September 18 exams, because September 18 exams was the first exam sitting when this new format of the paper was introduced. So September 19 exams, for which you all are approaching, will be the fourth exam sitting with the new format of the paper. So over the last three exam sittings, examiner has not done anything unusual in terms of the question one, two, and three. You need to understand how they goes in. Now let's do a quick analysis of that before I just exit out of it. If I just do a quick analysis of your paper format, making it more easier for you. If you look at the paper format, and you look at the question number one, which is worth 50 marks, all of you know that this 50 marks question comprise of four professional marks. And I will be guiding you in the session today how to gain them. Now comes the 46 marks. When you look at the 46 marks, which is basically the marks which are technical marks, which you need to gain on the requirements of the exam paper. When you look at these technical marks and you look at these 46 marks, the major part of these 46 marks are allocated on risk assessment, which is the topic I am doing on the very first day. Now, all of you must be familiar with that if you've done ample amount of practice, that the first question consists of risk assessment, right? So risk assessment takes the most of the marks in the first question, and ideally approximately or on average it's 20 and at some time it's even 24 marks. So quite a higher weightage, right? Because the first question is formulated at the stage of planning. So it's a planning question, right? So being a planning question, the examiner spends a lot of time on risk assessment. Then what else the examiner asks you? In the very first question, there is a tendency that examiner even asks you procedures on certain areas. Normally, if you see the past papers, you see that procedures on certain areas on average are around 8 to 10 marks. They vary, right? And in some exam setting, they are zero. But it has been a regular feature, right? It has been a regular feature of the first question that examiner tends to ask procedures on certain areas for 8 to 10 marks. Then another very common thing which has been part of the question number one is the ethical and professional issues. Examiner brings a case study on ethical and professional issue in the very first question for like 6 to 8 marks. So it would not be a surprise looking at ethical and professional issues in the very first question for like 6 to max 8 marks. Now, these risk assessment is a must, right? Let's highlight that with yellow. Risk assessment is a must. Procedures, at times they are in the first question, at times they're not. Ethical and professional issues, at times they are in the first question and at times they're not. But they had been a regular feature. They had been a regular feature of the first question. Now you move down. What else is in the first question? Examiner can ask you accepting a new client in the first question, accepting a new audit client in the first question, or accepting a service, accepting a non-audit service, accepting a non-audit service. something which is known as practice management. If you've seen the syllabus of your AAA exams, there is an area which is known as practice management. So this is basically the practice management. Accepting a new client can come in the very first question. It has already come in the past exams. I think it was in the December exams, the December 18 exams. Accepting a new audit client or accepting a non-audit service can be part of your first question. And else, examiner can even test your knowledge in the first question. Examiner can test your knowledge like using the work of an internal auditor. Examiner can test your knowledge in the first question like using the work of an expert or using the work of a component auditor. So it's quite a diversified question, right? It's quite a diversified question, but the main core area of the first question, where almost 50% marks are allocated, is an area which is known as risk. Rest, rest is important, but they keep fluctuating. They keep fluctuating from an exam sitting to an exam sitting. But this is the breakdown, an ideal breakdown of what mostly comes in the first question. And more importantly, the four professional marks. Okay, now let's look at quickly the question number 2 and 3 so that you have a fair idea. So on the very first day, day 1, we are doing risk assessment, right? Number 2, the question number 2. The question number 2 is of 25 marks and it is set at the stage of completion and reporting. So this is a question which is not at the stage of planning. This is the question which is at the stage of completion and reporting. Examiner says that the question number 2 is a completion question. The question number 2 is a reporting question. So when you see a completion and reporting, what sort of topics can you expect in the second question? Number 1, the first topic you can expect in the question number 1 relating to completion, something on completion, ethical and professional issues or quality control issues, ethical issues, quality control issues can come at the stage of completion, quality control issues and professional issues. Because a lot of time, if you've practiced the past papers, you must have seen that a question on ethical professional issues starts with audit is nearing completion. In the very first paragraph, the examiner says audit is nearing completion, or at times the examiner says the audit report is to be signed next week. So in the very intro paragraph of the question number 2, you see that the examiner tells you that you are standing at the last days of the audit. So ethical issues, quality control issues, and professional issues at the stage of completion is a very regular feature of the question number 2. Then at the completion stage, another thing which has been a very regular feature is the evidence in the working paper file. A lot of time you must have seen this as a past paper. Regular feature of the triple exam that you need to write the evidence in the working paper file. The question says you are a manager and you are reviewing the working paper file, and being a manager reviewing the working paper file, what evidence will you expect in the working papers? So evidence in the working paper is yet a very important issue which comes in question number 2, and I will be covering the evidence on the day 3. Sorry, I will be covering the evidence on the day 2. I will be covering the ethical issues on the day 3. Then out of completion, and you move into reporting. Now, reporting is a very main area of your question 2. Uh, a question on reporting, a question on audit report is a must. You cannot get a question 2 without report because report is a must of the question 2. Just like risk is a must of the question 1, reporting is a must of the second question. Now, examiner normally allocates 10 to 15 marks to a reporting question, and the remainder can go to any other area. The remainder can go to any other area. And when the examiner is setting a question on audit report, which is a must, every exam sitting you find a question 2 on reporting for 10 to 15 marks. Examiner can even set a question on going concern, which is another very important area. And going concern and its reporting implication. Going concern and its reporting implications. What are reporting implications of going concern? Because that connects with report. So this is the second question, right? So the one highlighted in the yellow is like a core part of the question two. And else the examiner can ask you ethical and professional issues, and else the examiner can ask you the evidence in the working paper file. Then comes the third question, question number three. Question number three is another question for 25 marks. And this is the question which is the most open-ended question in AAA, most open-ended question in AAA exams. That means anything can come here. Question number one is planning. Question number two is completion and reporting. Question number three is the most experimental question in the AAA exams. But one thing is good, that examiner says syllabus area F can be tested in question three. That is the other assignments. That is the other assignments. Now, interestingly, that has happened. That has happened, right? When you look at the September 18 exams, in the September 18 exams, the examiner tested the syllabus area F. Examiner tested the syllabus area F, and the examiner gives a question on review of the prospective financial information. Prospective financial information. Then in the June 18, then in the March 18 exam sitting, 19 exam sitting, the examiner again tested the syllabus area F. And then the syllabus area F was tested with due diligence review. So examiner, out of the four exam sittings so far, in September 18 and in March 19, examiner has tested the syllabus area F in the third question, right? But when you look at the most open-ended question, in the December 18 exams, examiner tested money laundering and a complete question on money laundering. So see, that becomes the most open-ended question. So examiner says, I can test the syllabus area F, which the examiner has tested out of 2 out of 4 times. But examiner even tells this is a more open-ended question. And then in the June session, the last one, the examiner tested the current issue on accounting accounting estimates. So there was an article by the examiner, right, on auditing the accounting estimates, and the examiner tested the auditing accounting estimates as a current issue article in the June 19 session. Now we know current issue is not a regular feature of the AAA exam. Current issue only comes in a AAA exam when the examiner writes an article. Current issue is basically the syllabus area G. And syllabus area G, whenever an article is published on a syllabus area G, then only the examiner tests the current issues. So for September exams, we are standing on the 5th of August today, right? So far, there is no article on current issues. So do you expect a current issue for September exams? So far, no, because there is no current issue article yet. So just a quick feedback. Is everyone clear on the paper format? Is everyone clear what is inside the first question and what's inside the second question and what's inside the third one? And do you all realize that the third question is the most open-end question? So two times in the third question, we have seen the other assignments, and 2 times in the third question, we have seen very unusual areas like money laundering and like current issues. Okay, now if you are all clear on the format of the paper, particularly those students who are appearing for the AAA exam for the first time in September 19. And this analysis must have helped you down with how you should be handling the paper. Now I'm moving out of this analysis and starting on with the day one. Just before starting on with the day one, I want to give some housekeeping instructions. First of all, whatever I am typing on the Word file, that will be shared with all of you. So don't be worried about that. There is a WhatsApp group, and the link of the WhatsApp group will be shared with you during the course of the webinar. You need to join that WhatsApp group, and in that WhatsApp group, I will be sharing on a daily basis the Word file which I am using during the session. So you will be getting these Word files on a daily basis, right? And the second housekeeping instructions, try to keep the question session limited. Focus on the session. In the last 10 minutes of the session, I will be taking your questions and answers, and I will be responding to your questions and answers in a more appropriate manner, because during the session, I will be more focused on the topic and delivering the topic. So try to concentrate on the topic and focus on the topic. And if you have any questions, you can put those questions in the last 10 minutes of the session so I can answer a sample of those questions within the 10 minutes time. Now, with those housekeeping instructions, I'm starting on with the day one agenda. Okay, now what's in the day one? The day one is risk assessment. The first question, as we were discussing, the question number one main area is risk assessment. 50% of the marks in the very first question ideally has to be on an area known as risk. Now, I have purposely chosen December 15 question number one for my September 19 session. And I've given you two home questions, which is September 18 question number one, and then the June 17 question number one. Now, if you look at my previous webinars, which you can access at the ACCA Pakistan channel on Vimeo, since March 18, I have been doing risk assessment on a regular basis. So you can access my previous webinars to revise more. You can access my March 18 webinar, June 18 webinar, September 18 webinar, December 18 webinar, March 19 webinar, and June 19 webinar. You will get across so much practice of risk, and you will have a better understanding of risk before you enter the exam hall. But today I have chosen a specific question, which is December 15, question number one, which relates with audit risk. And the reason of choosing audit risk is that there is a high probability of audit risk for September 19 exams. Last time in June 19, there was a question on business risk and the risk of material misstatement. So I'm not focusing on business risk, though I've covered business risk multiple times in my previous webinars. You can have access to them, and the risk of material misstatement. But my focus today is on a more challenging area, which is audit risk, where mostly students are weaker at, and I need to guide you in a very different way this time about how you should be writing the answer. I have covered December 15 question in my September 18 webinar even, but this time I am doing this again with a very different approach, with a more student friendly approach, which will really benefit you and really help you exactly knowing what and how you should be attempting a question on audit risk. So let's start on with the session, and let's start on with the understanding of the audit risk. Now, when you start understanding the audit risk, the ACCA examining team for AAA has provided you a good support here. There are two articles of which the hyperlinks are given, which is a must to read article before you sit down and study and practice the risk area, right? So there are two articles. One is the examiner article here, which is about techniques. If you want to know how to write, what to write, then this is a wonderful article. And I will be covering this article in my session today, right? What to write, how to write. Then if you exactly wants to know the importance of the accounting issues and how to connect the accounting issues with risk, then this part 3 article is very good for accounting issues and how accounting issues connect with risk. So the part 2 article is about techniques, how to write an answer, and the part 3 article is about accounting techniques to connect with the risk question. So both these articles must be downloaded, must be read before you start to practice, right? Let's start on with the importance of audit risk and how you should be good at audit risk in the upcoming exams in September 19. Now, when we look at the audit risk, and each one of you must be very familiar that audit risk comprise of two components. One component of audit risk is known as risk of material misstatement, which is the most important component of audit risk. And then there is another component of an audit risk, which is known as detection risk. Now, when you are attempting a question on audit risk, you need to be very clear on risk of material misstatement, because most of the time in a question on audit risk, you are identifying risk of material misstatement because that is a major part of an audit risk question. Detection risk, hardly one or two in the whole case study. Detection risk is a minor part, and that's a more easier part to identify and write in the exam paper. So let's first become fundamentally clear on what exactly audit risk is. Let's connect that with the examiner article in the next half an hour, and then let's start practicing a good exam question on the techniques to do a good question on audit risk. Okay, I'm taking on my Word file again. And in this Word file, I'm now starting to exercise on audit risk. Now, please keep your focus very strong on the screens and concentrate on each and every line on audit risk. We're starting the area of audit risk, which is highly probable for exams in September. Let's do a good analysis. Now, when you're attempting a question on audit risk, right, first of all, you should be clear what audit risk is. Let me take you to the examiner article first, which is the examiner article on exam techniques, part 2. And let's see what can we get out of this article. Examiner article, exam technique, part 2. Let's go through this article and try to find some good conclusions. Now, when you go to the examiner article, which is right in front of your screen, you can see this article, part 2, risk. This is such a good article written by the AAA examining team, which gives you deep insights about audit risk and how you should be writing an answer on audit risk. If I take you down into the article, you can see this paragraph here, which I have highlighted in blue, and you go through this formula given by the examiner, which is right here. Audit risk is equal to ROMM multiplied by detection risk. Now that means when you're attempting a question on audit risk, risk of material misstatement is a very, very important part of it. You all know that risk of material misstatement also comes as a separate question. So at times the examiner even asks you in exam paper, evaluate the risk of material misstatement. But when the examiner asks you evaluate the audit risk, then audit risk includes the risk of material misstatement as well as detection risk. So let's first take the formula and let's be very clear on the formula. Audit risk is equal to risk of material misstatement into detection risk. Now that means we have to work on both of them. So when I'm practicing the audit risk question with you in the session today, you will also be understanding risk of material misstatement. So that means you can also practice a question on risk of material misstatement by virtue of this day one. Okay, now we need to understand what is risk of material misstatement basically, because that's the major part, right? So first of all, let's understand what is risk of material misstatement. What is a risk of material misstatement? Let's go back to the examiner article to find the answer of. Now, when you read the paragraph which is right here, it clarifies everything. It says, for a risk of misstatement to occur, there must be an inherent risk of an item being misstated. There must be an inherent risk of an item being misstated. So inherent risk is part of the risk of material misstatement, and a risk that the client controls did not identify the misstatement. So there is an inherent risk of an item being misstated, one, and number two, the client controls did not identify the risk. So that means for a risk of material misstatement to occur, there must be two things. Number one, there must be an inherent risk of an item being misstated, and then the client controls did not identify and correct the misstatement. Now, let's put that back again on the word file. That means what is in the risk of material misstatement? One, the inherent risk, and secondly, being the control risk. The two combined together, become a risk of material misstatement. Inherent risk. Inherent risk is something which is by default. We know that the assets could be overstated. That is an inherent risk. Liabilities. Liabilities could be understated. That is the inherent risk of liabilities. Inherent. Try to understand the meaning of the word inherent. Something which is by default. Assets overstated. Liabilities understated. Bracket close. Again the bracket open. Income overstated, and expenses understated. So this is inherent, right? This is inherent risk. This is by default risk. What is the default risk of an asset? It is overstated. By whom? By the management. Management do window dressing, right? So that's what we're understanding. What is the inherent risk of a liability? Understated. What is the inherent risk of an income? Overstated. What is the inherent risk of an expense? Understated. Now these are risk which is there in the financial statements, right? And this is how the management do the window dressing. This is how the management fabricate the financial statements, present the financial statement in a misleading manner, right? Do you all agree management presents the financial statement in a misleading manner? Should we be skeptical about that in the exam paper? Right? So the more skeptical we are, the better we are. So we should be skeptical. Skeptical about what? About assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. Then there is an element of a control. Controls are weak. Controls are ineffective. So do you all believe when controls are weak and ineffective, the risk of material misstatement increases, right? When controls are weak and ineffective, the risk of material misstatement increases. Is that true? If I can get quick answers. So control is yet another element, right, of a risk of material misstatement, because if in an exam paper the controls are weak, or the controls are ineffective, then that increases the risk of material misstatement in the financial statements. So when you are attempting a question on audit risk, first of all, you should know what exactly is a risk of material misstatement. These are inherent risks. These are controlled risks. Now, we know that most of the time when you're attempting a question on risk of material misstatements, the risk of material misstatements move around the risk of material misstatement in an exam paper moves around accounting treatments. And you're reading a case, sometime you get an accounting treatment of share-based payment, and sometime you get an accounting treatment of revaluation. Sometime you get an accounting treatment of deferred tax. Sometime you get an accounting treatment of revenue recognition. And that's where you need to be skeptical of. Now, when you are reading the case of an audit risk, there might be many accounting treatments, and you need to identify as a student that is what is wrong with the accounting treatment, what is wrong in the accounting treatment, to pick up the risk, what is wrong in the accounting treatment given. And if you pick what is wrong in the accounting treatment given, then you need to know that something which is wrong must had materially misstated the financial statements. Is that true? If you think there is a wrong accounting treatment in the case study and the management has done the wrong accounting treatment in the case study, it must had materially misstated the financial statement, right? So there are so many accounting treatments if you've done practice of the past papers that in every situation you come across accounting treatments and you need to judge whether this accounting treatment is wrong. So you need to pick up the wrong side of the accounting treatment. And if you think that is a wrong accounting treatment, then obviously you must have picked the materially misstated element. So wrong accounting treatment, right? And try to connect the wrong accounting treatment, right? And obviously it has to be material, right? You need to find out the materiality. I'll be guiding you on that in my step 3 ahead. So what is the risk of material misstatement? Something which is by default inherent. Now, when you see the exam paper, what is happening in the exam paper? The accounting treatments, and you're going through the accounting treatments, and you need to judge in the exam paper, is this the right accounting treatment? What is wrong in the accounting treatment? If you pick the wrong side of an accounting treatment, then you are capable of finding the material misstatement in the exam paper, right? That's one side. Secondly, in a case study, there are not just accounting treatments, right? In a case study, there might be problems within internal controls. So if you find there are problems within internal controls in the case study, then you are finding the risk of material misstatement again. So when you read the case, in a case you have accounting treatments, which if wrong will materially misstate the financial statement, right? Then there are problems within the internal controls in the case study. If you think that the internal controls are weaker, then you have identified that there is a risk of material misstatement with weak internal controls. And you have identified that the financial statements could be materially misstated. Now, is everyone clear on that? Let's do the final part of the risk of material misstatement and then goes to detection risk and then start on with the exam paper. Now, when you look at the risk of material misstatement, which relates with inherent risk, which is mostly the accounting treatments in the exam paper, and then the problems relating to the internal controls, which is like weak internal controls in the case study, is there a way to write the risk of material misstatement in exam paper? And the answer is yes. And the answer is in the examiner article, which we are reading just now. Is there a way to write ROMM in the exam paper? Yes. Let's see how. Right? Let's find a way of writing a risk of material misstatement. Is there a way to write a risk of material misstatement when it relates with an accounting treatment? Let's find the answer for this. Now, when you go to the examiner article, finding a way of writing the risk of material misstatement, before we look on the detection risk, the examiner has defined it right over here in front of your screen. Examiner says, when, can you see this blue highlighted box, right? This is where I am reading. The first line, when describing the risk of material misstatement, an effective approach is to use the following steps to construct your answer. Examiner is saying, use the following steps to construct your answer. So see, there is a guidance, but if you're not following this guidance, you're writing a wrong answer. You're writing a weak answer. Examiner has given you a systematic step, and I will be exactly doing this in the session today. The systematic steps in writing the answer. See, what is the first thing the examiner is saying when you're attempting a question on risk of material misstatement, when it relates with an accounting treatment, right? Which is the major part. Number one, calculate and conclude on the materiality of the issue where sufficient information is available. So examiner is saying the first thing you have to do is to calculate and conclude on the materiality of the issue where sufficient information is available. Now, a lot of time when you're looking at the case, you find numbers. Now, where numbers are given, examiner is saying where sufficient information is available, right? So if the examiner says um, the share-based payment expense is not recorded, I cannot find the materiality because the number is not given. But if the examiner says the share-based payment expense of $5 million is not recorded, then I can find the materiality of the $5 million. So examiner is saying calculate and conclude on the materiality where sufficient information is available, right? So that's the first step of a question on risk of material misstatement. Then after that, the examiner says a mark will be given for a correct and relevant calculation. So if you do the calculation of materiality, examiner is saying a mark will be given. A mark will be given for the correct and relevant calculation of materiality with an appropriate conclusion. So if you calculate the materiality and you conclude on the materiality, examiner is saying you will get 1 mark for this. But examiner says the marks for materiality are capped in the exam questions. See the last line. It's not like you're calculating 10 materialities in the exam paper and you get straight away 10 marks. No. Examiner is saying, yes, when you calculate and conclude on the materiality, you will get 1 mark. But examiner is saying there is a cap on that. What is the cap? 4. Examiner says the marks are capped up to 4. So can we calculate more than 4 materialities in an exam paper in one question? Can we calculate more than 4 materialities in one single exam question? No, because the examiner is saying the marks are capped up to 4. So how many materialities maximum can we calculate in one exam paper? 4. So in one question, the maximum materialities I can calculate is 4 because the examiner says there is 1 mark up to a maximum of 4. So what's the first thing we're doing when we're writing a question on risk of material misstatement? Step 1, calculate and conclude on materiality, bracket where possible, and we're getting 1 mark to maximum of 4. Is that first step clear to everyone? Step 1, calculate and conclude on the materiality, bracket where possible, 1 mark per materiality. and to a maximum of 4. Can we get more than 4 marks on materiality? We cannot, right? Next, step 2. In the step 2, the examiner says, briefly describe the relevant accounting treatment, because most of the time the question emphasizes upon accounting treatments one after another. But read very carefully. Examiner is not saying explain the accounting treatment. Examiner is saying briefly describe the relevant accounting treatment. Briefly. And then the examiner says, note that no credit is awarded for accounting standard names or numbers. No credit is awarded. No credit is awarded for accounting standard names or numbers. No credit. No credit. Right? So what is the examiner saying in the step 2 to us? That you need to briefly describe the accounting treatment. I'm highlighting briefly describe because that's something you overlook most of the time as students. Briefly means concise, concisely describe the accounting treatment. And I'll demonstrate that in my session today once I start the practice, that how to write concise accounting treatments. Should we mention the name of the standard and the number of the standard when we are briefly describing the accounting treatment? No. Briefly describe the accounting treatment. N- Don't mention, don't mention the name or number of the accounting standard. So is everyone clear on that? Is that something in black and white? That's a frequently asked question, right? By the students, should we write the name and the number of the accounting standard? The examiner is saying no credit for that. No credit for that. Right? Then in the step 3, I'll be demonstrating them, right? Step 1 and step 2. So just wait for that. Then in the step 3, what should we do? Relate the risk in the scenario to the accounting treatment. Relate the risk in the scenario to the accounting treatment. So in the step 3, we need to relate the risk in the scenario to the accounting treatment. So what are we doing in the step 3? Risk. Identify the risk. Identify the risk relating to accounting treatment. Relating to the accounting treatment. How many types of risk can be there with reference to accounting treatment? Example, wrong recognition, something being wrongly recognized. No disclosures. No disclosure can be a risk. Inappropriate disclosure. Inappropriate disclosure. Uh, wrong classification. Wrong classification of something. Wrong valuation. Uh, inappropriate. Inappropriate or no or inappropriate impairment review or inappropriate valuation, revaluation. You're all accountants, right? Uh, Risk in an accounting standard. How many types of risk are there in an accounting standard? Presentation, classification, recognition, valuation. Is this all what you learn from an accounting standard as accounting students? Recognizing something, presenting something, disclosing something. So what is the risk? The risk can be of a disclosure. The risk can be of a recognition. The risk can be of a revaluation. The risk can be of impairment. So are you getting the point of risk? What examiner wants in the step 3? That try to identify the risk. If the question says the share-based payment expense is not recorded, the share-based payment expense is not recorded, then what's the risk? The risk is recognition, no recognition. The risk is no recognition of an expense. If it says related party disclosure is not made, then the risk is no disclosures. So are you getting the point? 3, risk relating to the accounting standard. And then in the fourth step, the examiner says, illustrate the impact on the financial statement. Illustrate the impact on the financial statement. So in the fourth point is impact on the financial statement. Now, the impact on the financial statement is basically what is known as under and over statement. Under or over statement. Step 4. So now recap. Sum up. What's the summary? Firstly, what should we do? We should first work upon materiality, number 1. Number 2, we should work upon the treatment. Number 3, we should work upon the risk. And number 4, we should work upon the impact. Is everyone clear with the summary given? Materiality, treatment, risk, impact, right? How many marks will we get for that in a question on audit risk? In total, 3 marks. Learn the marking scheme. If in an exam paper, you write the materiality, you write the treatment, you write the risk, you write the impact. This is a 3 marks situation. This is a 3 marks situation. And how many materialities can we write in an exam paper? 4. Now, if I am writing, try to understand the marking scheme now. I'm starting on with an exam paper. The marking scheme consists of 3 marks, and the marking schemes consist of 2 marks. When will I get the 3 marks? If I write materiality, if I write treatment, if I write risk, if I write impact. But there might be so many situations in the exam paper, right, where there is no materiality. True or false? There might be so many situations in the exam paper where there is no materiality, yet there is a risk and an impact. Do you agree with the statement? Uh, can I get a quick response to that question? Right? So impact on the financial statement, right? There might be so many risk, right, in the exam paper which does not have materiality. So if I'm, for example, I'm writing a treatment plus risk plus impact. Will I get 3 marks here? Treatment, risk, and impact? Or is something missing here? Treatment, risk, impact. Will I get 3 marks? No, I'll only get 2. Okay, next situation. If there is only, if there is no treatment, like controls are weak. Now see if there is a situation like controls are weak. So if controls are weak, will I get 3 marks? No. So if controls are weak, there is only a risk and there is only an impact. So how many marks will I get? Again, 2. So when there is a involvement of a materiality with an accounting treatment, risk and impact, then only you get maximum 3 marks, right? But when materiality gets minus, then you get 2. When you get normal situations like the company does not have an internal audit department. Now see, what will you do? The company does not have an internal audit department. How many marks will I gain from this situation? I just need your quick testing, right? The company does not have an internal audit department. How many marks will I gain from this situation? 2. Okay. Second, the share based payment expense is not recorded. There is no value, right? Share based payment expense is not recorded. There is no value. 2. Share based payment expense of a $5 million is not recorded. Share based payment expense of a $5 million is not recorded. So is everyone clear on the marking scheme 3 and 2? So when you are reading an exam paper, do you know where I can get 3 and where can I get 2? So when you read an exam paper, you can bifurcate 3 and 2 when you're writing the answer. Okay, that's one part of the structure, right? Now let's quickly do the detection risk. We've done the risk of material misstatement. So the risk of material misstatement, examiner says there are 4 steps: materiality, treatment, risk, impact, and you're getting to know the marking schemes. Okay, let's do the second thing, which is known as detection risk. How many marks will I get for detection risk? 3 or 2? 2, right? Because detection risk does not have any materiality or a treatment, right? Detection risk is a very general statement, like the first year audit. So if there is a first year audit, obviously there is no materiality, there is no treatment. So I'll only be getting 2 marks for a detection risk, max in an exam paper. So it's 2 marks. Let's see, what are detection risk? Has examiner given us some examples of 2 marks? Let's go back and see the examiner article for the detection risk. Okay, now please be very careful. This is the last time and the last paragraph. I'm looking from the article, then we'll exit from this article, and we need to spend time on the December 15 question number 1 to exactly understand how to apply the 4 steps and how to apply the 3 marks, 2 marks to the exam paper. Look at the paragraph in front of your screen. It says audit risk, where you are asked to evaluate audit risk in an exam. Is that a potential question for September 19 exams, where you are asked to evaluate audit risk in an exam? That's what we're practicing, right? Much of your answer would be the same as for a requirement asking for risk of material misstatement, as these form major part of audit risk. Have you got this statement in clarity? Where you are asked to evaluate the audit risk in an exam, much of your answer would be the same as for a requirement asking for risk of material misstatement, as it forms the major part of audit risk. Do you all believe ROMM is a major part of audit risk? So much of the answer will be same if I'm writing an ROMM answer or if I'm writing an audit risk answer. So much of the answer will remain the same, right? Then the examiner says, what's the difference between audit risk and ROMM? The difference here is that detection risk. So when you're attempting a question on audit risk, the difference is the detection risk is now also relevant. So in a question on audit risk, detection risk is also relevant. Examiner is saying there are some examples of detection risk. Do you give importance to examiner examples when you're reading the past articles? How many times you read examiner articles and underline examples given by examiner, because these examples gets into the exam paper. I've seen so many students that they don't underline the examiner examples. What examples is the examiner giving us of the detection risk? Number 1, recent appointment. Recent appointment as an auditor, number 1 example. 1. Number 2, inexperience in a client new market. Inexperience in a client new market. Inexperience in a client new market. 2. Number 3, time pressure. Time pressure for the audit. 3. The examiner is giving 3 examples of detection risk. They might come to your exam paper. They've come so many times in the past paper. But you should give importance to these examples. 3 examples of detection risk the examiner is giving, which can be part of your question in September 19. Let's bring them to the word file. The first example, recent appointment as an auditor. Recent appointment as an auditor, which is normally said as first year audit, new audit client. How many times have you seen in the past paper in an audit risk question, a new audit client, a first year audit? I hope you've seen that multiple times in past paper. Do you agree with that? First year audit, a new audit client. Then the second situation, inexperience. Inexperience in the client new market. Does that means first year audit? The second point. Second point means the first year audit? No, it says inexperience in the new market. Quite possible the client of which you are the auditor has entered a new market. So if the client has entered a new market, do you have experience of the client? Yes. But do you have experience of the new market? No. So where is the detection risk? The detection risk is in the whole client, or the detection risk is in the new market where the auditor will have less knowledge. So examiner is saying this is another example, right? Examiner is saying this is another example where the auditor might have less knowledge of the business. See what's happening. Point number one, recent appointment as an auditor, less knowledge of the business, less knowledge of the business. Thus, detection risk would be detection risk would be high. In the second example, the examiner says inexperience in the new market. So I will say less knowledge, not of the business, but I'll say less knowledge of the new market. And thus, detection risk could be high for anything pertaining to the new market, for anything in the financial statement pertaining to the new market. Can you understand the difference between the first and the second point? Is first point more broader? Recent appointment. The first point is more broader, right? The second point is more narrow, less knowledge of the new market. So thus detection risk could be high for anything in the financial statement pertaining to the new market. And the last example given by the examiner, time pressure. Do you all believe when there is a time pressure, there might be a panic? There might be auditor overlooking material misstatements because there is a time pressure. So when the auditor is in a panic and auditor is overlooking things, is the detection risk higher? So is everyone clear on the three examples given by the examiner? Recent appointment as an auditor comes so many times in the past paper. Inexperience in the client new market and time pressure. So is everyone clear on gaining 3 marks and gaining 2 marks? Is everyone clear on that? And is everyone clear on what is an audit risk? It comprises of the risk of material misstatement and it comprises of the detection risk. Is everyone clear on the structure? Because I need to start on with the practice, right? So first give me a quick response. I need to take a break even and then starting on with the practice. So just before the break, tell me some quick, I need some quick feedback. Number one, is everyone clear on the structure of the audit risk? Okay, does everyone knows that audit risk comprise of two things, ROMM and detection risk? Okay, and do everyone knows that ROMM comes from accounting treatments and ROMM can come from control related problems, right? And is everyone clear on the marking schemes? 3 marks and 2 marks. Okay, and the final thing, detection risk. Whenever the auditor has less knowledge of the business, it will increase the detection risk, right? Because what is the meaning of the detection risk? Auditor fails. So if auditor has less knowledge of the business, the auditor will fail. So we have to do the exercise which will clarify more things. We just prepared the structure, right? So if any one of you is still not clear with the 2 marking, you will be cleared through the exam paper. You will get 2 marks when there is no materiality, as simple as that. If you're writing something in the exam paper which does not have materiality, then obviously that situation is giving you 2 marks, as simple as that. And I'll be illustrating more clearly that once I start the practice of the December 15 paper. Okay, it's time for the first break, uh, approximately 15 minutes, because after 15 minutes, I will be starting on with the December 15 question number one to illustrate you how can you gain marks. So stay tuned and be back into the live session after 15 minutes, because anything you miss at the start of the December 15 question can be very critical. So try to be in time exactly after 15 minutes into the session so that you get everything from the start, right? It's 7:20 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time. So I'll be back live at 7:35 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time, right? So 7:35 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time, tune for live session back again. So you get exactly the December 15 question one right from the start. And that's where you will come so clear on 2 and 3 marks. Okay, just before I go off the break, and I would be looking forward to your feedback for the first 80 minutes of the session. That what has been an overall feedback for the first 80 minutes, particularly those students appearing for the first time, and then again the students who are repeating the AAA exams. I'll be looking forward to your feedback in between the break time. Okay, off to the break and back in 15 minutes. Okay, welcome back after the break. We are into the very first day of this Practice to Pass webinar for Advanced Audit and Assurance. And just prior to the break, I had been discussing with you the audit risk and the fundamentals of audit risk, including the marking scheme. And now, post break, it's just to implement that. And for the implementation, I am going through the December 15 question number 1. Now, when we look at the December 15 question number 1, now this is the December 15 exam paper right in front of your screen. We're looking at the very first question, right? And when we look at the very first question of this exam paper, it's the area we are attacking on in the next 90 minutes is to look at the audit risk, which we have just understood, right? So you can see the question in front of you, right? And we are looking at the requirement here. Evaluate the audit risk, and the marks are 18. Now, you know how to break these 18 marks, right? Wherever you get the number, materiality, treatment, risk, and impact, you will immediately score 3. And where you fail to find materiality or there is no treatment, then you're scoring 2. I'll be illustrating that. What is better in the exam paper? First to score or first to write the 3 marks equation if you're good on the 3 marks equation, because that can give you more in less time. Is that a good approach? If we attack the 3 marks first, how many 3 mark situation can we write in the exam paper? If you remember that the marks of materiality are capped up to 4, there are 4 marks of materiality. So how many 3 mark situations can we write in the exam paper? 4. So how many marks can we take in all? 12. How many marks we have for this question in front of your screen? 18. So imagine you're attempting a question for 18 marks, and if you are capable of identifying 4 situations in this exam paper where you can work upon materiality, treatment, risk, impact, you will immediately go up to 12 marks in just writing 4 situations. And then how many marks are we left with after that? 6. So how many more risk we should write for 6 marks? 3. Perfect. Anyone who's giving me the right answer means you've got the marking scheme perfectly. And anyone still confused, you need to go through this webinar recording again just to understand that you're getting the marking scheme effectively, right? So let's start the drilling and then I'll make a summary. 18 marks, evaluate the audit risk, right? Let's start the target. When you look at the first paragraph in exam paper, remember that the very first paragraph is an important paragraph, mostly because it tells you about the numbers through which you can determine the materiality. Now, when you see this here, there is a paragraph here. And in this paragraph, you can see the important numbers. Right now, when you see these important numbers, it says revenue is $138 million. The profit before tax is $9.8 million. So the revenue of this company is $138 million. The profit before tax of this company is $9.8 million. And the total assets of this company is $90 million. That's given in the blue box, right? Now, these are important numbers, right? Because we need to use these numbers to determine the materiality later in the question. Now, let's go back to the Word file, start attempting this question in a quick order. How can we gain quick marks in time management in exam paper? Okay, December 15, question number 1. And the question number one is on audit risk. We're attempting this, right? And we know that the question number one is to be done in a briefing note format, right? Is that true for every question number one? And the answer is yes. You will go down and you will see the email of the partner. And in the email of the partner, you will see that the partner will say, prepare briefing note for my use. Prepare briefing notes for my use. That is a common thing, right? That is a common thing in the question number one, that you have to prepare a briefing note. So let's prepare that as well, so that you have an idea of that as well. So you're gaining those 4 marks and then the 18 marks, right? So let's do two things, 4 marks and 18 marks. So that's in total the 22 marks, right? Prepare a briefing note. Now, when you start writing a briefing note in an exam paper, you put a heading briefing note on top, and under the briefing note, you write to, from, RE. RE is the reply, because you have got an email from the partner, right? So you're replying back to the email. So the subject will become RE. Briefing note, to, from, RE. Let's see what is to, from, RE in the case study. Now, when you go back to the case study to find, it's to the manager, because the email has come from the partner, right? So the partner has emailed me, I'm the manager. It's from the partner, audit engagement partner Sam Hockney, and it's regarding audit planning Dali company. Now I'm replying back to the email. So whenever I get an email from anyone, I just press the reply button, right? Everything remains the same. I just write the text and I email. So to, from, regarding, I will copy paste that exactly there. Now it was to me, right? It was to me. I was the manager. So now I'm replying back. So the two will become the partner, to the audit engagement partner, Sam Hockney. So you will change that context. It's now going back to the audit engagement partner, and I'll write the name of the audit engagement partner, Sam Hockney. And it's from the manager, from the audit manager. No name given, just audit manager, right? A lot of times student writes their own name in exam papers. Please refrain from that. Whenever the name is given, it's given. Whenever no name is given, then only write the designation as given in the format of the exam paper, audit manager. Reply. What's the reply? See the subject matter. Audit planning Dali company. It will remain the same. It will remain the same. Right? So audit planning Dali company will become the reply. Audit planning Dali company. So we're setting the briefing note, right? And the very first paragraph of the briefing note is the introduction. And under the introduction, you need to start writing the answer. Now, try to understand one thing quickly. I need to start the audit risk answer, but there is something very important which you will be getting through the session today, that when you're writing a briefing note, right, you need to structure a briefing note in the order you're seeing right in front of your screen, to, from, RE, and that will exactly remain the same as you got an email in the exam paper. You're getting these to, from, RE from the email in the exam paper, right? Then you write the introduction. Now see what the examiner is telling about the introduction. There is no date in a briefing note, right? You're getting the right format in front of your screen currently. Now, when you go back and you look at the examiner comment on the briefing note, see this right in front of your screen. This is from the September 18 examiner report, because I am in a worry that you will read the examiner report or you will not read the examiner report. So I've put the examiner report in front of you. See what is the examiner telling us for 4 marks. Candidates should note that the presentation marks are awarded for a suitable heading. Have you put a suitable heading briefing note? A brief introduction, a structured answer, and a clarity of explanation. Suitable heading, 1, brief introduction, 2, a structured answer, which I am about to write, and a clarity of explanation, which again I need to demonstrate. So examiner is saying if you do these 4 things, you will be getting marks. All candidates should be scoring a minimum of 3 professional marks and should note that in this examination, a brief introduction need be no more than a single sentence. See what is the definition here? A brief introduction need be no more than a single sentence. You're reading the words of your examiner. You need to rely upon them. You need to trust them. You need to, these are something like a guarantee here, right? A brief introduction needs be no more than a single sentence. And then the examiner says, and time should not be spent writing a full page introduction. Now, most of you in this webinar might be repeating the AAA. How many times we write lengthy introductions of briefing notes, introductions going on 6 lines, 7 lines, 8 lines. Examiner is even saying it should not be spent writing a full page introduction. So is everyone clear on a brief introduction here? Single sentence. Examiner is saying there has to be a single sentence in a briefing note introduction, right? Now, what exactly is the introduction? Introduction is, why am I writing the briefing note? Let's go back and see why am I writing the briefing note in the exam paper. My partner has emailed me, right? And in the email, my partner has said that I have to do 4 things. Number A, I have to do the audit risk in A requirement. And number B, I need to write procedures. So my partner wants me to do 2 things, right? Audit risk and procedures. And also he wants me to do additional information. So 3 things. So audit risk, additional information, and audit procedures. Now see how I write that in a sentence in the introduction. Introduction. The purpose of writing this briefing note, right? Sentence does not mean a line, right? Sentence means where you put a full stop. The purpose of writing this briefing note is to explain the audit risk, comma, the additional information and the audit procedures in relation to the audit of Dali company. In relation to the audit of the Dali company, full stop. Is this what the examiner was saying? A brief introduction, not more than a sentence. Have I wrote a sentence in front of you? Are you getting the importance of that examiner report and how I'm writing the answer? Is everyone clear with the connection? So when you see the requirements A, B, C, D, try to sum up the requirement, right? Try to sum up the requirement that the purpose of writing the briefing note is this, comma, this, and this. So is everyone getting the importance of a sentence? And see how many times you write more than that in the exam paper. So that's number 1. Now, after the introduction, what should I do? After the introduction, I should do my first requirement A, and my first requirement A is audit risk. Examiner was saying in the report, suitable heading, brief introduction, structured answer. Structured answer means A, B, C, D, structured answer. So what is the first structure of the answer? Audit risk, right? So I should start first from audit risk, right? A. And then the more important thing is the clarity of explanation, which I am about to guide you. Okay, let's go back and start writing the audit risk. Structured answer. No, and you need to do the briefing note in a structured manner, right? A, B, C. You cannot distort the briefing note B, C, A, or you cannot distort the briefing note C, B, A. The briefing note has to be done in A, B, C. You need to maintain the structure of the briefing note, right? So A is the audit risk. First, let's go down to the case and find the audit risk. You start to read from the background of the company, right? And let's see where we get the first value. Are we attacking the 3 marks first? Do everyone agree? Are we attacking the 3 marks first, where we need to write the materiality, the treatment, the risk, and the impact? So para 1, do we see a value in the para 1? No, there is no value in the para 1, right? That's 20 years, right? There is no value, dollar million. Can we see a dollar million in the para 1? No. Can we see a dollar million in the para 2? No. So can we skip the para 1 and 2? So because we're not finding any numbers here, right? Para 3. Can we see any value in the para 3? Notes from the meeting? No. Okay. Fourth para. Can we see a value in the fourth para apart from $2.90, which is a share price? But do we see a value dollar million in the fourth paragraph? No. Okay, perfect. Then comes to the fifth paragraph. Do we see a value in the fifth paragraph? The finance director recommended. The finance director recommended yes. So that's the first value, right? Let's tell you how to write this. Can we see the first value? Revaluation surplus of $3.5 million recognized in equity. The finance director recommended that the company's manufacturing site should be revalued. An external valuation was performed, resulting in a revaluation surplus of $3.5 million. Stop here and we'll read after. So, what is the problem here? What is the accounting treatment here? Revaluation, right? So, the very first value we are getting in the case is $3.5 million. So $3.5 million is about revaluation. So what should be my first heading? If I need to solve my paper quickly, my first heading would become revaluation. And under the revaluation, I will say, should I first start with M, materiality? The revaluation surplus of $3.5 million is, how much is the total assets of the company? 90 million. Can you divide this by 90 million? 3.5 divided by 90 million. The total assets of the company is $90 million. 3.5 divided by 90 is how much? Be quick. 3.8%. Okay. The revaluation surplus of $3.5 million is 3.8% of the total assets, thus material to the financial statements. So have I got my first mark? M. Examiner was saying calculate and conclude. Right, you should know the materiality percentages, right? I hope everyone knows the materiality percentages, or else you have to go to the book and read the materiality percentages. So is everyone clear? We got the first mark. Then go down. What should I do after the materiality? What should I write after materiality? No, after the materiality I should write the treatment. Which treatment? Revaluation. I should write the treatment of revaluation, right? See how I'm writing it. The company should revalue the entire class of assets, that is all the manufacturing sites, all the manufacturing sites. What were they revaluing? Go back to the case. The finance director recommend that the company's manufacturing site should be revalued. Should they value all the manufacturing sites? Because the IS 16 says the entire class of the asset, right? So should we value the entire class of the asset, all the manufacturing sites? Okay, so let's go back to the answer. The company should revalue the entire class of assets, that is all the manufacturing sites, and should ensure that the company should revalue the entire class of asset, that is all the manufacturing sites. However, if the entire class of asset is not revalued, if the entire class of asset is not revalued, it will What is the impact? If the entire class of asset is not revalued, it will understate the revaluation surplus or it will overstate the revaluation surplus. Understate. It will understate the revaluation surplus. So see, this is my 3 marks, bracket close, 3. If you don't want to write this, then take another 3, another way. Do this or do this. Copy the same situation from above, go down, paste it. The revaluation surplus is 3.8% of the total assets, thus material to the financial statement. Now change everything. There are so many accounting treatments of revaluation, right? If you don't want to write the entire class of assets, then you can write this. You will say it's 3.8% of the total assets, full stop. The company should ensure that the depreciation charge on the manufacturing sites are based on revalued amounts rather on the previous carrying values. Is that important? Is that another very important area of IAS 16, that when you revalue the assets, you should ensure that the depreciation charge is provided on the revalued amount rather than on the previous carrying value? And is there a risk that the management provides depreciation on the previous carrying values? Will that understate the depreciation expense? No, you have to write one of them, right? You have to write one of them. That's why I say or. The company should ensure that the depreciation charge on manufacturing sites are based on revalued amount rather than on the previous carrying values. If the depreciation is based on previous carrying values, the depreciation expense will be understated and profit overstated. Bracket close, 3 marks. If you don't want to write this in the exam paper, then write this in the exam paper. Again, copy the same situation from above, paste it down. It's 3.8%. I'm writing or right. So that means you have to write any one of them in exam paper, Otherwise, I could not have written or, I would have written and. So the revaluation surplus of $3.5 million is 3.8% of the total assets, thus material to the financial statement. Then you write the treatment. The assessment of the fair values, in determining the revaluation is inherently risky as it involves use of estimates and greater subjectivity. Is that true? Do you all believe that? That the assessment of the fair value in determining the revaluation is inherently risky as it involves use of estimate and a greater subjectivity? Anything where there is an estimate increases the risk. So thus, if the fair value is wrongly estimated, it could under or overstate the revaluation surplus. Now we were not sure, right? So we say it could under or overstate the revaluation surplus. Bracket close, 3 marks. So are you getting the situations of 3 marks? Any one of them? It starts with materiality, then we have a treatment. Within the lines, we have a risk. When we say if, that's where the risk starts, right? So see how many times I wrote if, then I wrote if, then I wrote again if. So the if is the risk, right? So a lot of students are asking, where is the risk? The risk is when you say if. So if is the risk, because if is the doubt, if is the susceptibility that something may go wrong. So when something may go wrong, you write in the exam paper if. Yes, we can do that as well. So is everyone clear on a 3 marks drafting? We just did one of them, right? On revaluation, because we got the first value. Okay, let's do the second one. Okay, now within the same paragraph we were reading. Okay, now please look at the same paragraph again. Ali Chaudhary, I made that clear many times in the last 2 minutes. I have written the word or. So that means, can we write all three of them? Be logical, right? There is a difference between or and and. So or means any one of them, right? And means all three of them. So we're just gaining 3 marks, right? Any one of them and gain 3 marks. No. We will not write the names of the risk, right? I'll again be answering your questions in the end at the end of the session, right? Let's focus on completing the answer first. The same paragraph, I'm reading again. The finance director recommend that the company's manufacturing site should be revalued. An external valuation was performed in June 15, resulting in a revaluation surplus of $3.5 million being recognized. So have we covered revaluation till that full stop? Yes. Now read after the full stop. The finance director has informed you that the audit committee that no deferred tax needs to be provided in respect of the valuation because the property is part of the continuing operation and there is no plan for disposal. Can you find another accounting treatment here? Deferred tax needs not to be provided, which is technically wrong. But is there a value given of deferred tax? The value was given of the revaluation. Is there a deferred tax value given? So if I write the accounting treatment of deferred tax, if I write the accounting treatment of deferred tax and the risk, how many marks will I get? 2 only, right? So I'll be doing the deferred tax later, right? After 5 minutes, yeah, or 10 minutes, because the deferred tax will only give me 2 marks, right? I hope all of you agree with that. So the value was of revaluation, right? The deferred tax comes later. Okay, now go down. In the next paragraph, can you still find a value in July 2015, the paragraph? Yes, and the value is a government grant of a $10 million. So can I work on the government grant of a $10 million? Okay, let's go back to the word file. Should I put my next heading, government grant? And under the government grant, I will say the grant of $10 million. Can you please divide the grant of $10 million with $90 million, which is the total assets? Okay, 11.11%. Okay, the grant of $10 million is 11.11% of the total assets, thus material to the financial statement. So have I got my first mark? Okay, what should I do next? Treatment, right? Now just go back and see what's happening in the case study. It says specifically $2 million of the grant compensates the wages and salaries incurred. So $2 million grant compensates the salaries and wages incurred. So has the expense already incurred? Has the company already incurred the expense? So can we recognize the $2 million as income? Yes, because the $2 million grant, we received the $2 million grant, right? Have we incurred the expense against that? So if we have incurred the expense against the grant, the $2 million, we can recognize that as income, right? It says salaries incurred. So the expense has been recognized against the $2 million. But then the question says the remaining grant. How much is the remaining grant? 8 million. Relates to the continued operations with the condition of the grant being that the manufacturing sites will remain operational by 2020. What should I do of $8 million? Should I defer this over the next 5 years till 2020? Yes. And should I recognize $2 million as my income immediately? Yes. And should I defer the remaining 8 million? So what's the risk? If I recognize the entire 10 million as income, will that overstate my profit and understate the deferred liability, deferred income? So let's write that down. Let's write that down. See how you write the answer. Now be focused on the answer, right? The grant of $10 million is 11.11% of the total assets, thus material to the financial statement. Now write the treatment. The grant should be recognized. The grant should be recognized as income over the period to match the grant received with the related cost for which it is intended. Now, just see this. Grant should be recognized as income over the period to match the grant received with the related cost for which it is intended. So $2 million was a grant received with the related cost. Have we incurred the related cost against the $2 million? Have we incurred the salary expense? Yes. So should we take it as an income immediately? And for the remaining $8 million, the related cost will be incurred over the next 5 years, right? Over the next 5 years. So should I defer it over the next 5 years? No, there is no need to calculate the materiality of 2 and 8. You're just calculating the materiality of the overall figure, which is 10. So next, after the full stop, I will say, thus $2 million should be immediately recognized, recognized as income, whereas the remaining grant of $8 million should be recognized as deferred income, over a straight line basis, till 2020. Thus, if, see again I'm writing if risk, the if $8 million, if $8 million is not deferred, it could understate the deferred income and overstate profit. See again, can you find the if? If is the risk, and can you see the impact? Overstate impact, understate impact. Can you see the materiality? 11.11%. And can you see the accounting treatment? The big accounting treatment right from here to here. So have you got 3 marks from this paragraph? So are you understanding what we got before the break? Materiality, treatment, risk, impact. Are you getting the way of writing it? And is it like I'm writing unnecessarily long answers? Am I writing speculations? Am I writing the whole government grant standard? Am I telling that the government grant can be recognized as an income, or it can also be deducted from the cost of the asset? Am I telling everything about government grant, or I'm just keeping it down to specific things given in the case study? So also understand the length of the answer. Am I writing an ambiguous answer? Am I writing an incomplete answer? Or am I writing it as a very specific answer around the case study given? So how many marks have we scored so far on the numbers? 3 from the revaluation and 3 from the grant. So how many marks we got? 6. Okay, let's go ahead and see, is there any number given? Okay, when I come to the next paragraph, can you see a number in the next paragraph? And that relates with work in progress. Work in progress is valued at 12%, and the last year it was 9.5. Can you see something strange happening here? Has the examiner given us the previous values in the above paragraph? No. But is the examiner giving us the previous value for work in progress? So is there any hint here that we should do something extra? Yes, let's see how. But can you all pick work in progress is valued at $12 million? So should I go back to my Word file and write work in progress as my next heading? Work in progress. And again, the first line, the work in progress is valued at $12 million, which is, can you tell me the percentage dividing by the total assets of $90 million? Okay, that's wonderful, which is 13.33% of the total assets. Thus, material to the financial statements. So have I got my first mark? Now, should I write the risk or should I write the treatment? Treatment, okay. Work in progress should be valued at the year end on the basis of the stage of completion, on the basis of the stage of completion of the material, labor, and overheads. Material, labor, and overheads. Is that true? The work in progress should be valued at the year end on the basis of the stage of completion of material, labor, and overhead. Did I write the treatment? Now comes the risk. However, the stage of completion is determined by management, which is subjective, and inherently risky. Thus, the work in progress inventory could be, thus the work in progress inventory could be inventory understates or inventory overstates. Okay, and do you all believe that the stage of completion is a subjective area? And anything which is subjective has a risk. So thus work in progress inventory could be overstated. I got my 3 marks. Now, was the examiner giving me the prior year number that the work in progress inventory last year was $9 million? So when you know the comparative number, what you do? Do you compare how much something has increased or decreased over the last year? Be like an auditor, right? Be like an auditor. When you have the last year number, normally what we do we compare it how much it has increased or decreased? Yes, we analyze. That's perfect, right? So what should we be doing here? Thus work in progress inventory could be overstated, full stop. The work in progress inventory has increased by, how much it has increased by over the last year? Can anyone find the percentage? Last year it was 9 million. This year it's 12 million. So how much it has increased over the last year? It was 9 million the last year, and it was 12 million this year. So it has increased by 26%. The work in progress inventory has increased by 26% over the last year. Is that a significant increase? Do you all agree? Is that a significant increase, 26%? No, as a percentage, is 26 a good percentage, significant percentage? Yes. So, and what is the risk in inventory? Do inventory overstates as a risk? So the work in progress inventory has increased 26% over the last year, which is a significant increase and indicates that such risk of overstatement exists. That such risk of overstatement exists. So if in an exam paper you're doing a question where there has been a drastic decrease in operating expense, does that give evidence that the expenses are understated? Is that true? And if there is a drastic increase in a current asset, if there is a drastic increase in the current asset, does that indicates that it has been overstated, right? So yes, the percentage could be 33, right? Uh, Change the percentage, whatever is the final answer, but it has increased a lot, right? 33% over the last year. That's $3 million, right? Divided by $9 million, because last year it was 9 million. So 3 divided by 9, which is significant risk and indicates, will we get some marks for identifying this 33% over the last year? Will the examiner give me any bonus marks for this? At times, the examiner says half a mark for the effort you did. So don't be optimistic. We got our 3 marks, right? But if the examiner is generous, examiner can give you a 0.5 marks on the last line. And so you can be rewarded here with 3.5 marks in total. But just keep it to 3 on the pessimistic side. So how many marks have we scored so far out of 18? 9. So have we worked on the numbers? Right? So now how many marks are we left with? 9. So how many 2 marks situations should we be writing? 9 divided by 2, 5. 9 divided by 2, 5. We should be writing 5. Okay, let's go back to the case and see where to get things down. Okay, please, everyone is giving me a different answer to the increase. Some is saying 26, some is saying 33. Please ensure that you're using the right percentages. It's, I think some of you have distracted. It's 9.5 million, right? So the increase which has happened over the last year, it's not 3 million, it's basically 2.5 million. And when you divide that by 9 million, you get 27.77%, right? So 2.5 million is the increase over the last year, and 2.5 million when you divide that by 9.5 million. So the right answer, which none of you has produced and you've given me the wrong answers, is 27.77% over the last year. So that's the right answer. Sorry, 26%, 9.5. Yes, 26.31%. 2.5 divided by 9.5. Okay, irrespective, it's 26, 27, it's significant, right? There's just a calculation error because I'm looking at your answers in front of my screen. I was not using my own calculator, so I just took your answers, right? But the actual calculation is 2.5 divided by 9.5. So it's 26.33%, something like that. Okay, now can we start writing the 2 marks first? So can you feel the difference between a 3 mark situation and a 2 mark situation? So is it better in the exam hall that first we attack the situations which have numbers? If we know the accounting treatment, if we know the accounting treatment and we can find the numbers, circle the numbers and do them first. Because if you do them first, you are gaining quick marks. Once you're done with that, then come down and start the 2 mark situation. Okay, let's go back, start with 2 mark situations. Okay, let's go back. Okay, now can you see the paragraph in front of your screen? The very first one, Dali Company was established 20 years ago, right? And in the very last line of that, it says that the raw material is imported from the foreign suppliers. So when you see that the raw material is imported from the foreign suppliers, you can immediately think about the foreign exchange gains or losses, or you can immediately think about IS 21, because when you think the raw material is imported, you need to recognize the initial transaction at the spot rate, and then you need to recognize the at the transaction at the year end, retranslate that at the closing rate, right? So we can apply IS 21 to import. How many marks will be gained for that? 2, right? I'll be drafting it once I go to the Word file. Now come to the second situation. See this, from here to here, where management considers that design work will be significant, the customer is required to pay 30% in advance, and the remaining 70% is paid on the delivery of the machine. 30% is paid in advance, whereas 70% is paid on the delivery of the machine. Is there a risk of revenue recognition here, that we record the advance payment early, or we record the advance payment as our revenue, as our income? How we should treat the advance? As a deferred income? As a liability? Yes. So is there a risk that the deferred income is recognized as an income, and it will overstate the revenue? It will overstate the revenue. How many marks will I get for that revenue recognition criteria? 2. The treatment and the risk, right? The treatment and the risk. So, okay, 2 marks and 2 marks. 2 marks from imported from foreign suppliers, and 2 marks from the revenue recognition, right? Okay, let's go down then and find the next paragraph. See this paragraph here. From here to here. Just read it. The company's corporate governance was reviewed as part of the flotation process, resulting in the recruitment of 3 new non-executive directors and a new finance director. So new non-executive directors and new finance director, will that ensure a very strong monitoring of the systems? If the finance director is new, will he take time to settle down? Right? So do you believe that anything new takes time? So will there be a lack of monitoring or weak monitoring because they have less experience of the company, right? So will that give us another 2 marks? Yes, they will take time to understand the systems, understand the culture within the company. So that will make the monitoring weaker, right? And just one clarification, uh, there are maximum 4 marks for materiality, right? But in this exam paper, there were only 3 situations where I had numbers. So can I gain the 4th mark? No. It depends, right? If you're doing an exam paper where you have like 6 and 7 numbers, so I will restrict myself to 4 materialities, right? But if in an exam paper like this, I only had 3 numbers, so I will restrict, I will only work on 3 numbers, right? There is no 4th number. So is everyone getting that in clarity? If there are more than 4 numbers, if there are more than 4 numbers, how many maximum can I write? 4. right? So is everyone clear on that? That if there are more than four numbers, the maximum I can take is four. But obviously, when there are less than four numbers, then there is no issue, right? Just like this question, right? Is everyone clear on that? Okay, let's go back. So do everyone agrees that the new non-executive directors and the new finance director is another 2 marks situation, right? Okay, then you go down. The company has introduced a cash settled share-based payment plan, right? And look at the last paragraph. They've introduced a cash settled share-based payment plan, and the finance director says no accounting entries have been made. So is this a problem? No accounting entries have been made? It is a cash settled share-based payment plan, right? So we should have debited expense and we should have credited liability. So liability is understated, expense is understated. So are we getting another 2 marks here? Yes. So how many 2 marks have we got? Import from foreign supplier, 2 marks. 30%, 30% advance payment, 2 marks. New finance director, 2 marks, 6. Then we got the share-based payment, no entries made, another 2 marks, 8. And then you come back to the paragraph we did. No deferred tax needs to be provided. Have they provided deferred tax? So should I be writing the accounting treatment of deferred tax and the risk? Will I take my more 2 marks? So have I taken all of my 10 marks now? So 10 and 9. I'm taking my marks up to 19 now, right? So I hope you can feel the difference. Now I'm writing some 2 mark situations with you quickly so you can understand how you write a 2 mark situation when you don't have a materiality. Now you know the case, right? So I'm going back to my screen and I'm starting to write the answer. Okay, let's go down first with deferred tax, for example. Defer tax. Defer tax liability, because it relates with revaluation, right? Deferred tax liability should be recognized for all taxable temporary differences, for all taxable temporary differences between the tax base of the asset and its carrying amount, irrespective whether management has plan of disposal or not. It was given in the case study, right? Because the director was saying there is no plan of disposal, so we should not recognize a deferred tax. So you're saying no, deferred tax has to be recognized for taxable temporary differences, irrespective whether the management has a plan of disposal or not. I took that from the case study, right? Thus, as no deferred tax liability, is recognized, the deferred tax liability is understated. So did I write materiality here? But did I wrote the other two things, the treatment and the impact? So I'm getting 2 marks here, right? Then the next one, 30% payment in advance. 30% payment in advance. The 30% payment received in advance should be recognized as deferred income, as the performance obligation, has not yet been met. That is, the machine has not been delivered. The machine has not been delivered. So 30% payment received in advance. See how am I writing the answer? I started from the point rather than telling examiner the entire IFRS 15 and the conditions of performance obligation and writing a page on IFRS 15 and not even telling what's happening in the case study. A lot of students have a habit of writing content from the accounting standards. Have I written contents of accounting standards in any of my situations above? Or was I writing a very specific accounting treatment around the case study? So the 30% payment received in advance should be recognized as a deferred income as the performance obligation has not been met. And am I vague in my statement? Is my statement vague? So the machine has not been delivered. Full stop. And you say, thus, if, again the risk, thus, if the 30% payment received in advance is recognized as income or is recognized as revenue, it could over it could overstate the revenue and understate deferred income. Bracket close, 2 marks. I hope you're getting sense of the 2 marks situation. Yes, but should we name a standard or should we refer to the title of the standard in the answer? No. Examiner was very clear, right? We should not name the standard or the number of the standard or the title of the standard. So are you becoming clear on the drafting style of 3 and 2 marks? Can you continue the same format yourself now? The remaining question and the questions back at home, going with 3 and 2. Is everyone clear on the structure of 3? Materiality, treatment, risk, impact. Right? So you need to ensure that you read the case, pick up the problem from the case, and then justify. Uh, Nurul Huda, I am picking the points from the case, right? 30% payment in advance is not my point, right? It is a point coming from the case study. Deferred tax is not my point. It is a point coming from the case study. Work in progress is not my point, right? It's coming from the case study. So I cannot understand your question when you say why you are not writing points picked in the scenario. I'm writing the same points I picked in the scenario. I'm not writing my own answer. So is everyone clear between the 3 mark situation and a 2 mark situation? Okay, now the final thing, right? You will continue the answer yourself, right? So we started writing the briefing note, and the briefing note started with 2 from RE, introduction, then you get down with the first heading, audit risk. In the audit risk, you went into 3 marks and then 2 marks. And suppose this is where you end the requirement. Then you will come down with A2, which is another requirement of the exam paper, which is additional information. Then there is another requirement of the exam paper, which is B, which is procedures. And when you complete the procedures, you will write the conclusion because the briefing note has to end with a conclusion. And again, the conclusion has to be concise, just like the introduction. For example, what is the major thing I'm doing in this question? Out of the total marks, what is the major thing I'm doing here? Risk. So is it better to conclude on risk? I cannot conclude on procedures, right? I cannot conclude on procedures. Procedures are procedures, right? I hope you're getting the point here that the conclusion is the conclusion of the risk here. Now see how I'm concluding here. The financial statements of Dali company contains numerous risk of material misstatements. So the audit should be planned carefully to keep the detection risk, within acceptable limits. Full stop. Sentence. I wrote my introduction in a sentence and I wrote my conclusion in a sentence. I said that the financial statements of the company contains numerous risk of material misstatement, so we should plan the audit carefully to keep our detection risk within the acceptable limit. Any sort of a conclusion, right? But the conclusion can be the sum up, and conclusion can be the way forward, that how we should be going ahead. But it has to be concise, it has to be small, it has to be brief. Right? And please, one very important thing, a lot of time students copy paste the case study. You cannot just copy the lines of the case. A lot of times students have this bad habit of copying the lines of the case. Examiner says you cannot copy the case, you need to rephrase that. Rather than I take the full line, for example, I go to the case and I'll write the full line here. See this paragraph in front of your screen where I put the bracket where, and I start to write the answer. Where management considers the design work will be significant, the customer is required to pay 30% in advance and the 70% on the delivery of the machine, full stop. And then I start writing my answer. How many of you have a habit of doing that? That you copy paste the lines first and then you start to draft after. It's just about rephrasing. Did I took the heading 30% advance payment to draw the attention of the assessor that this is the paragraph I am writing? 30% advance payment, and then I wrote under that. So please ensure that you need to rephrase the paragraph in your own words, or you need to put a heading on the top so that the assessor knows where the point has come from. A lot of time the student copy paste the paragraphs into the word file, into their answer, and then they start writing. This is a very bad habit of students, right? Rephrase. Yes, Bilal Farooq. That is right. That is right. You can do that. So is everyone clear on the format of the briefing note? How to write a briefing note to, from, RE, introduction, go in the order, and then complete the briefing note with a conclusion. So you got 4 marks and you have worked on 18 marks, right? Okay, now just one last thing left. Because I have time and I can do that. There was a requirement in this exam paper which also comes many times, which is the requirement number B in front of your screen. Can you see that? 2A2. Recommend the additional information which would be relevant in the evaluation of your audit risk, and the marks are 5. Let's make you realize in the next 10 to 15 minutes that these are bonus marks. Recommend the additional information. This is a requirement which is not very regular, but in like 5 questions you will get them in 3. So you should know what is to mean recommend additional information, right? So recommend the additional information which would be relevant in the evaluation of your audit risk. Let's see what does that mean. Okay, let's go back to the word file. Okay, out of audit risk. And now we are taking on another understanding. We just left with 20 minutes to end the session. The session ends at 9. So let's do this and complete this. Okay, the examiner says recommend the additional information in evaluating the risk. Have you identified the risk in the question? Right? So examiner is saying you have 5 marks for this. Now, first of all, number 1, be clear. Examiner says recommend. Recommend means to list. Recommend means to write something in bullets. Recommend means to write something in sentences. Recommend. Okay, what do we recommend? additional information which will help in evaluating risk. Information. What is information? Information are the documents the auditor will need to verify the are the documents the auditor will need to verify the identified risk. And these documents are obtained from the management. These documents are obtained from the management at the start of the audit. At the start of the audit. Information. Information, right? When you see information, information is something tangible. Information means a document. So when you are writing information in the exam paper, try to focus on a document which you need to verify the risk. Now, for example, I start writing additional information in exam paper, right? And I say the auditor should request the following additional information from the Dali company management to evaluate the audit risk, to evaluate the risk identified, to evaluate the risk identified. Now, you know the risk, you have that at the back of the mind, right? Number one, see how to write it. The first risk we wrote was revaluation, right? So for revaluation, should we need the revaluation report of the expert report who conducted the revaluation, expert report to confirm the assumptions used in revaluing revaluing the manufacturing sites? Is that what the auditor needs when he goes to the audit? Do he needs the expert report to confirm the assumptions used? Was assumptions a risk? Was assumption a risk? Yes. Do I need the fixed asset register to confirm fixed asset register to confirm that the assets are held at revalued amount? The assets are held at the revalued amount and are depreciated on the revalued amount. Revalued amount and depreciated on the revalued amount. Government grant. Should I be needing the grant agreement to confirm the conditions associated with the grant? To confirm the conditions associated with the grant? Because 8 million of the grant has conditions, right, up to 2020. So can you think, am I writing journal information, or am I connecting this information with the risk I have already identified? Expert report, fixed asset register, the grant agreement, work in progress valuation report. Obviously, the management must have made the valuation report of work in progress, where the stage of completion must be coming. Work in progress valuation report to confirm the assumptions used in valuing the work in progress. Sorry, to confirm the stage of completion. To confirm the stage of completion used in valuing the work in progress. Should I have the revenue recognition policy to confirm how the management recognized the 30% advance payment? Should I have the revenue recognition policy as a document to confirm how they recognize the 30% advance payment? So should I have this revenue recognition policy to confirm how 30% advance payment is recognized? So will this all help me to mitigate my risk, number 1 to 5? Do you all believe 1 to 5 will help me later in the audit to mitigate the risk? But is it important information which I should be needing to evaluate the risk? Yes, the policy, right? The policy means something on paper, right? Paper means tangible, right? So can you understand one sentence, one mark? One sentence, one mark. But can you understand that we have information? See information, expert report, fixed asset register, the grant agreement. Can you feel the information here? That is, it's all tangible, it's all black and white, it's all like a document, revenue recognition policy. But you will not get the full mark unless and until you write the reason. Can you see for every information I'm writing to confirm? Am I writing the reason for every additional information to confirm, to confirm? So if you only write information, you get half a mark. But if you write the reason, that's 1 mark. So is it not a bonus situation in exam paper? It is such an easy requirement in exam paper, which mostly student gets confused with. They overlook it and they have no idea how to write it. Has this exercise made it clear for you how to go down with uh, additional information? So in the exam paper, you will first identify the risk, right? Now, knowing the risk, if the examiner asks you the additional information, you will write the information you will be needing to evaluate those risks or the information you will be needing to mitigate those risks. But can you see the information is starting with information? If I write review the expert report, review the fixed asset register, I will make it a procedure. So am I writing the information with the verb? If you can give me a quick answers, am I writing the information with the verb or am I writing the information with the information? What is the information? Right? So if in your exam setting you get to write additional information, can you connect the additional information with the risk you have done above? So are these easy marks? 5? So now see how have you structured today? Let's do a quick recap. Then I have to do a quick Q&A session with all of you. Let's recap. Recap day 1. Number 1, the marking scheme was the most important thing we came across today. The 3 marks, how to get them, 2 marks, how to get them. Then the 4 marks on the briefing note, right? And then the 5 marks on the additional information. Now, if any one of you wants to know that sometimes in the exam paper, the examiner says in an audit risk question, utilize the analytical procedures. I have covered that in my last webinar, June 19, day 1. Go to the June 19 webinar, watch the June 19 webinar, and you will get to know that if in an audit risk question, the examiner asks utilize the analytical procedure, how many marks are there for utilizing the analytical procedures and how you write analytical procedures. So try to take that knowledge from the June 19 webinar. So I have covered today the 3 marks, the 2 marks, the 4 marks, the briefing note, and the 5 marks for additional information. Is everyone clear on that? 3, 2, 4, 5? right? So the marking scheme was the most important thing, right? We got. Then secondly, articles. You need to read the article on exam technique part 2, which is very, very important. Exam technique part 2. You need to read the article, right? Don't mention the accounting standard numbers. Don't mention the number or name of accounting standard. And also in the marking scheme, right? Also in the marking scheme, we got to know uh, capping for materiality. There are maximum 4 marks for materiality, maximum 4 marks for materiality. Okay, now finally, I'm putting some questions to you quickly. Do respond me with that so I have an understanding of how you are preparing yourself for the exams coming up in September. First of all, just within this last 5 to 7 minutes, I will be needing your feedback of the session today. And please remember that when this session comes to an end, you will see right in front of your screen a feedback form. Kindly fill in that about the session today. So please spend a minute and two after the end of the session to fill in the feedback form. So because that will be very valuable. And over the next 5 minutes, you can just drop in your feedback about the session today. Uh, have you done a self-analysis of yours in the session today? Those repeating. Have you done the self-analysis of how you do an audit risk question? Have you got some weaknesses? Have you understand your weaknesses? Have you got some clues how you can gain marks on audit risk questions? So will you all make a habit of reading the examiner reports, understanding the examiner reports? Because that's the clue, right? That's the clue, right? So please ensure that you know the marking schemes, you know the examiner reports, you know how to write the answers, because that's sometime that is an area where we normally are weaker and we perform weak in exam paper, right? Try to read the last 3 to 4 examiner reports, the examiner reports of the last 3 to 4 exam sittings, so that you know exactly where is the examiner appreciating the students and where is the examiner criticizing the students, right? And I hope all of you have joined the WhatsApp group, which has been created for this practice to pass session. If there are any queries, any questions which you believe has been unattended in this session, I will be responding to them over the next 3 to 4 days as early as possible so that you get a cleared answer of your queries, right? So once you're part of the group, you will be getting this Word file, which I'm using on a daily basis. Many students are requesting these summaries of the accounting standards. I can also post that on the WhatsApp group. So join the WhatsApp group so you get the resources, but please show patience for that. I will be putting these resources over the next 2 to 3 days and will be answering your questions even on the WhatsApp group. Okay, the final thing, right, of the session today. We've just done the recap. We've just gone through the audit risk and the approaches to audit risk, right? Just one last thing where I want examiner feedback coming right in front of your screen. We've already taken the examiner feedback about the 4 marks and how should we be taking the 4 marks in the exam paper. Now I want you to go with some don'ts of the examiner. See in front of your screen. Another common mistake candidates made on this requirement was to spend a lot of time discussing speculative risk, which generally do not obtain credit. In my whole drafting today, did I wrote any speculative risk? Did I wrote anything hypothetical? Or was I taking things from the case and then explaining them in the context of the case? A lot of time Students do speculative risk. Then look at the next comment. Speculative risk do not attract credit in the exams, and it is surprising that candidates choose to evaluate such risk when there are so many risks in the case study. Have that been proven today? Were there so many risks to score 18 marks in the case study? Were there so many risks in the case to get 18 marks? 3 marks, 2 marks? So should I be taking a hypothetical assumptions? Right? Next. See this, December 18. It says the question was on ROMM. The question was on ROMM in December 18. It says interpreting the question as all audit risk rather than ROMM, which meant time was lost discussing detection risk, which could not attain credit. Will I be discussing detection risk in a question on ROMM? The examiner is saying the student spent time discussing detection risk in a question on ROMM. These are all concerns of examiner. And then look at this most important concern from the very recent report, December 18. December 18. It should be noted that when the question asks for ROMM, it does not require the definition of risk. Did I started writing my briefing note with the definition of audit risk? So it does not require the definition of risk. Theory behind audit. We're not writing theory, right? We're writing audit risk from the case study or the audit approach to address the risk. How many times a student writes risk and even writes the mitigation of the risk in exam paper? Examiner is saying you're not writing approach to address the risk in exam paper. Many students have this confusion. They write risk and they even write the mitigation of the risk in exam paper. Is the question requiring mitigation of risk, or is the question only asking you to write risk? How many of you repeating ever wrote risk mitigation in exam paper? Have you ever done that blunder of writing risk mitigations in exam paper with the risk? Okay, one student is saying I did that. So is the examiner saying we should write the mitigation? Should we write mitigations? No, examiner is saying no need to write mitigations, right? Candidates who have studied past exams will note that in the planning question where audit procedures are required, this has been asked for a separate requirement. Do examiner ask for procedures separately in exam paper in the question one? In the question we were doing today, right? There was a specific procedures on government grant. There was a specific procedure on the work in progress. So should we be writing the mitigations of the government grant and of the revaluation or of the deferred tax in the answer? So please don't write mitigations, right? And the same problem is here, right? Including detailed definitions of audit risk or risk of material misstatements. The briefing notes are prepared for the partner, and this type of information is not required. You're writing a briefing note to the partner, right? How can you give definitions in a briefing note to a partner? So the partner is experienced, he's capable. Should you be telling him the definitions of things? So please be realistic. Please be realistic. Please download the three latest examiner reports. Download the three latest examiner reports. Read them and then attempt the questions on audit risk. And please, I'm recommending one more time my June 19 webinar. I did a question on audit risk in my June 19 webinar, which involves the analytical procedures. So if you want to take an audit risk question with analytical procedures, then first watch the June 19 webinar and then watch this webinar, the recent one, September 19, and then start attempting questions on audit risk, right? It's now entering into the final minute. So it's time to say you goodbye to all of you. Thanks for participating in the live session. And tomorrow we are meeting back for evidence and procedures, day 2, evidence and procedures. And just into this last minute, can you just share your quick feedback about the session today, just in like a word or a sentence? How has been the session today? And I will be looking forward to you tomorrow with the day 2, which will be on evidence and procedures. Okay, thank you very much for joining today. And I will be joining you tomorrow, same time, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. the Pakistan Standard Time for the live session on evidence and procedures. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.